Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the session on framing a coherent and seamless transition. My name is David Brassu. I'm director of the Conference Board of the Mathematical Sciences and a professor of mathematics at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's a great privilege to be able to welcome all of you here today. We have 22 states represented. We had an enormous response to the request for applications. 32 states asked to be part of this forum. As you can see, we could not have squeezed in many more states than we have right now. But we're going to work you hard, and I hope that you're prepared for that. Want to warn you that this is not a place where you're going to get answers. It's a place where we hope you will begin to frame questions. And there'll be a lot of work ahead of you. This is really the kickoff event for what will be a multi-year effort by all of the state teams. Going back to your home states and putting together the task forces. And I'll talk a little bit more a little later about what actually is going to be happening here in the forum over these next 2 days. Want to first of all thank our sponsors, without whom this would not have been possible: the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the National Science Foundation, the Teague Foundation, Pearson, and Texas Instruments. Really appreciate their willingness to step in and help make this happen. Also, a few things that I need to let you know about. First of all, those who haven't picked up their folders or name badges, they're over on the left as you go out of this room as you head toward the elevators. Also, there has been a substitution on the agenda. Alma Salazar from the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce. Unfortunately, her son is sick with a stomach flu, so she was not able to come today. Rachel Levy will be replacing her on the workforce panel, one of the 3 breakout panels that we have. So again, the goal of this forum is to help state leadership teams draw on the expertise of the CBMS societies and the Dana Center to form task forces, working to coordinate efforts across grades 11 to 14 that will lead states to create policies and practices. There are a lot of verbs in here. There are a lot of things that we want you to do, and this is the beginning of the process of doing it. The structure of the forum this morning and for part of this afternoon, you'll be learning about what the CBMS societies have to offer. The Conference Board of the Mathematical Sciences is an umbrella organization that helps to coordinate the efforts of 18 professional societies in the mathematical sciences. These are societies that focus on K-12 issues, such as the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, the Association of State Supervisors of Mathematics, the Benjamin Banneker Association, Todos Mathematics for All, and also the societies on the post-secondary level, the Mathematical Association of America, the American Statistical Association, the American Mathematical Society, the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics, and even non-academic societies such as the Society of Actuaries and the Institute for Operations Research and Management Science. So we're a very, very broad organization, and I think we're an ideal organization to help facilitate this kind of dialogue, because for too long, K-12 and post-secondary have been in their own silos, and they haven't talked with each other. So this morning, you're going to hear about what some of these societies have to offer in terms of reports that have come out, in terms of supports that they make available, and also to learn about the national issues at both K-12 and post-secondary that these societies are wrestling with. What are the big national issues that you need to be aware of at the state level. Then, starting mid-afternoon, the state groups will really begin to work together toward defining the big question or questions with which you want to leave this forum, the questions that you're going to go back to your states, form your task forces to work on. And here's where the Dana Center will be coming in and providing a lot of support to the state groups. And I just want to acknowledge the Dana Center staff. If you could stand up, those who are with the Dana Center to help identify. And they will be carrying most of the work of this forum and helping the states as you move forward. So again, the title this morning is Framing a Coherent and Seamless Transition. And the transition from high school to college, as I'm sure you are aware, has been hardly coherent or seamless. In fact, one of the common observations is that increasingly the high schools are teaching the college mathematics, and the colleges are teaching the high school mathematics. And it's not absolutely clear that either group is really doing what they're really, really best at. At the very least, those who are teaching in the high schools and those who are teaching in the colleges need to work together to look at how this transition is going to operate. And there are serious problems. I just want to illustrate a few of the things that I think illustrate the problem that we're focused on. One of them is that 89% of graduating high school students actually have completed a course in Algebra 2. Now, what Algebra 2 means varies greatly from school to school and state to state, but at least they have Algebra 2 on their transcript as a course that they have completed, which in theory should mean that they are ready for college-level mathematics, for a college course that carries college credit. And yet 59% of two-year college students and a third of the four-year college students have to take a mathematics course when they get to college that does not carry college credit, one of the pre-college or remedial courses in mathematics. It's not just the students who come in with inadequate preparation to start at the college level. Pre-calculus is really supposed to be a high school course. And 41% of the students who graduate from high school have completed a course in pre-calculus. That's well over half of the students who will go on to either a 2 or a 4-year post-secondary, 2 or 4-year college. More than half of them have completed pre-calculus. They're just shy of 3 million students, at least this is data for the fall of 2015, just shy of 3 million students who started as a full-time college student in either a 2 or a 4-year college. We know again that over half of them have completed pre-calculus, and yet 2.5 million students in the fall of 2015 enrolled either in a pre-college math class or in college math or pre-calculus. So what we're seeing here is what's happening with these students. They get into college and they wind up backing up. At the very least, they're repeating the last course that they took in high school. Very often, they're repeating 2 or 3 courses. There's something that just doesn't make sense about the fact that what they've learned in high school doesn't count when they get to college. And so the whole process is not articulating well. Extremely discouraging for these students who graduated from high school, thought that they were on the track to actually succeed in college, and find that they have to back up and retake courses that they thought they had already passed. This is true across the levels. I've been particularly interested in what happens with students who take calculus in high school. I chair the AP Calculus Development Committee for a number of years, and I've been particularly interested in what happens to those students. From the high school class of 2013, 19% of the graduating class had completed a calculus course while they were in high school. That's at least 700,000 students. I think today, with growth in AP Calculus, we're probably over 800,000 students who've completed a course of calculus in high school. Yet even these students wind up backing up. Only about 20% of those students with credit for calculus in high school actually go on beyond the first course in calculus when they get to college. Another 20% of them retake the first calculus course and do well in it. They get an A or a B. But another 10% retake that calculus course and they don't do well in it. What's even more discouraging is that about 30% of the students who have completed a calculus course while they are in high school get to college and are deemed not ready to start learning calculus. They must take pre-calculus or college algebra, or many of them actually wind up in remedial mathematics. There is something very wrong across the entire spectrum. And one of the things that I hope you will do is go back to your home states and think about this issue of the transition. What is this doing to students who think they've had a good high school preparation and then get to college and find that they're not ready? And the onus is not just on the high schools, the onus is also on the colleges. What the colleges are expecting, how the colleges are putting together their curricula. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on both sides, which is so important that we've got high school representatives here and two-year college representatives here and four-year college representatives here. There's a lot of work to be done. I know that there's a great deal of variety in terms of where the states are right now. Many of you already have effective task forces working at the state level to look at these issues of transition. Some of you have hardly been aware that there is another side, either working K-12 and not realizing what the issues really are at the higher education level, or working at higher education without a real grasp of what's going on at K-12. So, a word about going out and getting into the breakout sessions. Those are going to follow the panel that we've got. We have a group of panelists who will be talking about some of the recent work of the different professional societies. After that's over, you're going to have a break. Then ask the state teams to split up. There are going to be 3 breakout sessions, one in higher education, one in K-12, and the third one in workforce issues. I ask that the state teams make sure that at least 2 people go to each of the breakout sessions. And I also ask that you don't just go to the breakout session in the area where you work. We really want the state teams to be aware of what's happening in areas where the individuals may not personally be working. So for higher education, you should have at least one person who doesn't work in higher education go to that panel. For K-12, at least one person who doesn't work in K-12. And for the workforce, at least one person who does, well, make sure that you have someone from, make sure you have someone from K-12 and someone from higher education. Who goes to the workforce session. So I think I'll get into the panel at this point, and just want to introduce the moderator for our panel on society reports. That's Suzanne Weeks. She's a professor of the mathematical sciences at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, works in the Center for Industrial Mathematics and Statistics. She will also be one of our speakers in the workforce panel. She is co-director of preparation for industrial careers in the mathematical sciences. And please join me in welcoming Suzanne and the panelists will be talking about the society reports. Thank you. As they're coming up, one thing I forgot to mention is that all of the slides, as well as the videos, we're video recording these sessions, they will be made available to you, and we'll give you the links to those. So after this forum is over, slides and the videos will be available.
I need to know which slides you were putting up, because none of them are open. They're all up here. Okay. So, unless you want to have them open them up, they're all up here. So, as far as an order, no one is giving me any.
That's fine. We'll be fine. Okay. Thank you. Like zero. Good morning. Yeah. You guys can hear me? Good morning, everyone. Do the clapping. If you hear me, clap once. No, let's not. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So in this panel, good morning, good. So in this morning, we'll hear from the major societies about various reports. The goal is to learn what they have to say about the transition and that space between the last 2 years of high school and the first 2 years of college. We'll be hearing from NCTM, and I have to write out what these acronyms mean because there's no way I'm going to get them right off the top of my head. From the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics first. Then we'll hear from AMATYC, American Mathematical Association of Two-Year Colleges. From the Mathematical Association of America, the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators, the American Statistical Association, and the National Academies. And lastly, from the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics. You all have the panelists' bios and beautiful photos in your packets, but still, I'd just like to highlight some things. So the first speaker we'll have is Dr. Robert Berry, and he's the president of NCTM. Everybody quickly write down what NCTM means, all right? And he's also a professor of education and human development at the University of Virginia. So thank you very much, Robert, for being here. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Julie Phelps, and she's a professor of mathematics at Valencia College in Orlando, and she's representing AMATYC. Quick, AMATYC, okay, good. Next, we'll have Dr. Rachel Levy, and she's Deputy Executive Director at the Mathematical Association of America. Oops, I should have just said MAA. And more recently, she was prior to that, she was professor of mathematics at Harvey-Mudd College, and she'll be talking about various things that have come out of MAA, et cetera. And then, let's see, I don't forget, yes, Dr. Michael Steele, who's currently an NSF program officer in the Division of Research and Learning. And he is usually a professor of math education at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and he's the president of AMTE. Okay, that's the next quiz point. And then, so the next panelist, yes, Nick is here. We have Dr. Nick Horton from Amherst College, and he is a professor of technology and society, which sounds really cool, and he's also professor of statistics and data science. Nick is a fellow of the ASA and AAAS. That's a new one, right? And he will be talking about the ASA curriculum guidelines and the GAZE report, etc. Lastly, we have Dr. Dan Teague, who has, for almost 30 years, I think you're maybe a year or two shy, has been teaching at the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics, and he served on the NCTM, he's serving on the NCTM Board of Directors, he served at MAA. He's the lead author of the GAME report, and he'll explain what the GAME report is. So let's first welcome our panelists. And we will start with Robert Barry. And I'll give you 8 minutes.
8 minutes, all right, good. All right, I have 8 minutes, here we go, all right. Good morning, how are you? All right, so I'm gonna be talking about a publication from NCTM called Catalyzing Change in High School Mathematics, Initiating Critical Conversation. And the purpose of this report was to get stakeholders involved in conversations about high school mathematics. And from that report, there are 4 key recommendations. So I'm going to speak on those 4 key recommendations, but more importantly, really want to get the conversation started moving forward. And so these recommendations may be provocative for some of you as we go through. And so one of the key recommendations is that high school should discontinue the practice of teacher tracking as well as student tracking. So NCTM calls for detracking of teachers. When we say teacher tracking, what does that mean? It means that too often what happens is that the least experienced teachers often get the highest need students, and that the more experienced teachers who often get the upper level mathematics courses. And so we want to disrupt that, where we're calling for a balanced approach to teacher assignment. And that balanced approach may mean that you have an entry-level math course and an upper-level math course as your teaching assignment. Therefore, it distributes the responsibility across the entire mathematics department. In some situations where I'm only responsible for the upper-level mathematics course, I may not be as interested in what happens to those students who are not on that pathways or on that track. And so we want to distribute the responsibility across math departments in terms of students' responsibility, or teachers who are responsible for all students. The other thing is NCTM calls for is the elimination of tracking, of student tracking. And I'm going to provide more detail as we talk about this. The idea is that we call for a common course pathways. And we say common course pathways, in that first 2 to 3 years of high school mathematics, students should enter common pathways based on the 41 essential concepts, not standards, essential concepts that NCTM identified for high school mathematics. And in that common pathway, all students enter this common pathway at the same point, and then all students then progress to, after they've gone through the first 2 or 3 years, depending on however you initiate the conversation, however the conversation is discussed locally, then students can pursue after that initial pathway. The second key recommendation is, and I cannot see that slide, so is around the essential concepts, right? And so we identified 41 essential concepts, as I stated earlier, and those 41 essential concepts are embedded in the first 2 to 3 years of high school mathematics. And these are not standards. These, oh, okay, all right, I was staying, all right. So these are not standards, actually. These represent the critical concept. These are high-level ideas. These are high-level concepts that all students should know and understand. And just to give you some examples, so when we look at under the area of statistics, we see that the essential concepts for quantitative literacy, you see these are big ideas. And so there are 2 essential concepts under quantitative literacy. And we look under the essential concept for visualizing and summarizing data. Again, you see the big ideas there. And then when we look at, I'll just draw out one, Data arises from context, come from two types, quantitative and categorical. So you can see these are kind of big level, high ideas. When students leave high school mathematics, they know and understand what these ideas mean and can use these ideas as they move forward, as they progress, whether they choose to go on to college or go on to careers, therefore. Also in statistics, we find the essential concepts that fall under statistical inferences, and you can see that, again, I think there are 7 essential concepts under that big idea. And then, again, when I say high level, studies design 3 types: survey sample, experimental, and observation studies. Again, so you can see these are not standards. Again, these are big, big ideas. And finally, under probability. And so again, essential concepts are big ideas, a step up from standards. You can see that standards can be embedded under these big ideas, but they're not yet standards, or not standards. The other key recommendation that comes out of Catalyzing Change is to focus on reform and equitable teaching practices. And too often, what happens is that many students don't see themselves as knowers and doers of mathematics, and this is the space where we want students to see themselves as capable learners of mathematics. How do we impact, and the idea of identity, so students have a mathematical identity, and so they see themselves as doers of mathematics, and then the sense of agency. Agency means if I see myself as a doer of mathematics, I then engage in behaviors that doers of mathematics engage in. So we want students to see themselves as knowers and doers of mathematics. A third key recommendation that comes from Catalyzing Change is that we want students to study 4 years of mathematics. I don't think there's much disagreement in this room, hopefully not, but the idea is that we want students to study 4 years of mathematics, and along those 4 years, there should be 2 to 3 years along a common shared pathway. And so I just want to share with you a few ideas. So here's one from Oregon. I know Oregon's here in the house somewhere. And so Oregon has a 2+1 model. You can see, and I'm sure Marky's going to talk about this at some point, but you can see that in those bottom 2 red areas, that is kind of a common pathways. And then you see as students progress through their common pathways, you can see other 3 options that students may continue, whereas the high school, so you can see kind of traditional pathways, and then a statistics pathways, and then an applied pathways. Another would be from Escondido, California. You can still see this idea of Math 1, Math 2, and then students progressing to Math 3. Math 3, there's an option with statistics and an option with pre-calculus, and then again, then students can make choices for themselves to Math 4, AP Stats, or AP Calc. And then some of you may be familiar with the San Francisco model, where students are progressing through a common pathway starting in middle school, and then they make decisions about progressions along those pathways. And so there's a decision point right after geometry where students can take a compressed algebra 2 pre-calculus or continue on to algebra 2. So the idea of pathways in terms of the common pathways based on the essential concept, and then after students have finished that common pathway, they're making decisions for themselves. So NCTM, not only do we have the report from Catalyzing Change, but we also, if you go to our website, nctm.org/change, you can see Escondido and the pathway that I just introduced to you. You can see their timeline and how they implement it. You can see how the state of Colorado is using our idea around the central concept. You can see San Francisco unifies a model, and you also can see what's happening in Louisiana around intensive Algebra 1. So the idea of supports around Algebra 1 as students continue to study. These handouts should be in the folder that's available to you as well. So thank you so much, and I'm going to pass the mic, all right?
So our next panelist is Dr. Julie Phelps.
Hello, how are you? I have to say, when we were standing up here earlier, Rachel had to get the camera out and said this is like the best photo in the house. This is awesome to see all these people coming together and talking about transforming mathematics in their state. So this is amazing. So I'm very honored to be here and talking about the AMATYC information and impact. But before I can talk about impact, I believe we need to discuss our standards documents, because these big ideas came from work that was done for over several years. So we had, in 1995, we put out something called Crossroads, and in Crossroads, we talked about standards for intellectual development, content, and pedagogy. That was our first document. We had some amazing work there, and if you look at that document today, you'll see a lot of the common themes across the organizations are still part of what we talk about. Then Beyond Crossroads came out in 2006, and that one was about implementation. How are we going to implement these wonderful standards that we put out? And so we talked about, we got to talk about student learning and student environments. We've got to talk about assessment of student learning, curriculum and program development, instruction, and professionalism. So those were the things that we needed to do in order to implement the standards. And so we got to this next part where I want to talk a little bit about the name. The 2018 Impact Report came out, and it's called Improving Mathematical Prowess and College Teaching. And it definitely takes everything that we had done prior to this. And we looked at the research that supported all of this. But I think one of the key words that stands out, when we were talking about this, we wanted, it was beyond, so it was Crossroads, then it was Beyond Crossroads, and we talked about what our next report was going to be. What, Beyond Crossroads? I felt like we should have Buzz Lightyear in the room when we were discussing that. But we didn't. We realized that it was time for us to make an impact. It was time for us to stand up and not allow things to keep happening to us. We as math professionals in the two-year college and focused on the first 2 years of college really needed to do something and make an impact and change, help the students that need us the most. These are students that come to us, and we needed to figure out how to give a voice to what our students are experiencing when they come to us. So the word prowess. So you look at the word prowess and you think prowess. Okay, wait, they're just trying to fill in the P. No, that was not how the conversation went down. The word prowess is, we thought about it because we are going to battle. We are fighting things that are going on in legislations, people that don't really know about our world and our environment, and they're making changes, and we're going to have to turn the cruise ship around very quickly and let people fall off the side. No, that's not how we want to do this. We wanted to go to battle, and we thought prowess was the way to do it, which are actually our 4 pillars. So they're bigger ideas than the standards. So like was already said in the K-12 world, we have the prowess, which are our pillars of improving math. So we are literally talking about proficiency, ownership, engagement, and student success. So really quick about each one. Proficiency, when we talk about proficiency, we're talking about, I'm going to go to the chapters here, and it's going to be small print, and I'm sorry, but we are talking about starting a ripple effect. If you look at our graphic down here in the bottom corner, you'll see it at first. I'm from Florida, so of course it looked like a hurricane to me, but that's not what it is. It is a ripple. We are literally watching somebody put a drop in water, and we're watching everything expand out. So this is kind of our mindset about what we mean by making an impact. And we are going to start this ripple effect, and we needed to find our voice. We needed to stand up, we needed to get out there, find our voice, and so this is us as a national organization saying, there are a lot of commonalities between the K-12, between us, between the university, the state university system, but there are things that make our students different. So we needed to be able to be there for the students who need us the most that can't speak. So proficiency is one of the pillars, and you see the PR in there. We need to develop students' mathematical knowledge, and that matches a lot of the proficiency work that's been done, mathematical proficiency work that's been done in the K-12 world. We need to learn from what K-12 has done and do the same thing in our classes at the community college and the two-year college in the first 2 years of math level. Ownership. There is something to be said for letting students or giving students ownership in their learning process, as well as faculty owning what we are doing and teaching our students. Just because we were taught a certain way or we were given information to teach doesn't mean we need to keep doing it. We also need to talk about engagement. Active learning is a big piece of what's happening in our worlds today, and we know that it works. We know that engaging students in the learning process is how we actually help them learn. So we really need to develop their curiosity. We need to help them have their own intrinsic motivation. We've got to get more students motivated and going through the process. The last pillar is student success. We couldn't have a document that didn't talk about student success. And if you look at what we're required to show for student success, I'm not sure that a lot of people even are aware of the SACS accreditation or all the accreditation agencies and what they look for in terms of data that show that there are students being successful. So as a math faculty in our world, unless we've sat on one of those accreditation teams, we might not actually know the data that is collected at the state and then shared with the accreditation agencies. So it's really important that we actually look at what people are studying in terms of student success. So that entire chapter is about that. We have stories, continuing the ripple. We have different states. Ohio's here. They're mentioned in this document and what they have done to bring communities together to accomplish change. And there's a conversation about that. The Dana Center work is highlighted as well. If you look at the chapter 7, you can see quite a lot in there. And then we have research. 2-year colleges, when we talk about studying mathematics in the first 2 years, we haven't really separated out the two. Focused on what's going on in the community colleges, a lot of us has very heavy teaching loads. And for example, I teach 15 hours. I have 5 classes in the fall, 5 in the spring, and I teach 4 over the summer. Not every state is like that, I realize that, but yay, Florida. So I will say that we have very heavy teaching loads, so we don't really have the time. Even if we have the curiosity and we want to do the research, we don't necessarily have the time to do the research that's necessary, but we do have faculty that are engaged in the research, and we look for partnerships with the university system to actually study our students, and we have seen a lot more of that growth in the past couple of years, so I'm thrilled to say that we have that. We want to engage everybody in having this conversation. So I want to say, as we are talking together, we want to make sure that we're all a part of this conversation. And I would like to pass this on. Well, let Suzanne come up here and do that. But thank you so much.
All right, I guess, look, I'm too short for this. This is awesome. Here. And I'm loud, so it's okay. Can you hear me in the back? They're recording it. Oh, okay, and they're recording it. I'll do this. Thanks. All right, so my first job was teaching 5th and 6th grade math and 9th grade English. And I also, I stayed in the middle school for a while, and I taught high school for a while, 4 years, and then I kept wanting to go back to school. I'll talk about that in the industry talk, because I had an internship, and I thought I want to learn more math, and so I taught college at Harvey Mudd for about 11 years. And now I'm at the MAA, because the MAA is really about supporting mathematics and connecting people with mathematics, both in the classroom, out of the classroom, as teachers, connecting teachers with mathematics. And it's also about love of mathematics. So our vision, and Francis is here somewhere. You wave, Francis? There's Francis in the back. We envision a society that values the power and the beauty of mathematics and fully realizes its potential to promote human flourishing. So I'm not going to dig into our document so much at this moment, but what I want to do is kind of give you a sense of why you might send me an email and say, hey, you talked about this thing and I want to know more about it. So I hope this is the beginning of many conversations. I love getting emails from people I've never met before who want to connect around one of these ideas. So the first idea is, how is the math landscape changing and what are we going to do about it? And of course, you're going to be talking about these kinds of recommendations. So we have 3 documents, and these documents are possible. If you look on the poster outside, you'll see the NSF numbers of the projects associated with the funding associated with these projects. Because we're funded by the NSF, we are able to give these away for free. So these are available freely online to you, and it's really important that we have government funding for these kinds of research projects so that we can do the work, be paid to do the work, and then give the work away so everyone has access to them. So on the left, you see what we call our IP guide, our instructional practices guide. And you'll hear about things like active learning. You'll hear about things like teamwork and getting out there and getting students doing mathematics. But if you've ever had a kid, you'll know that they'll come home when the project is assigned and say, oh my God, I have another project with a team. And you'll also know, if you've ever taught teamwork, that students can come away from projects feeling less connected, less confident than before if they have a teammate that kind of stomps on them. So raise your hand if you have any experience of that, of hearing. Okay, so humans, right? So we do have evidence that active learning is great. And at the same time, we know that human behavior includes biases, it includes assumptions, it includes bad days, it includes feeling less than and then wanting to make yourself feel more than, especially with kids. And so this IP guide is really about the instructional practice of active learning with an eye to how to make sure that we are teaching people how to facilitate these kinds of experiences so that kids that leave them are feeling more connected to mathematics and not saying, oh my God, I have another team project and I don't know who's going to do all the work. It might be me, or it might be so-and-so that always seems to take over. Okay, and we know that this is important because in the workplace, that is how everything will go, right? Here you are in teams, right? Okay, so the second document, oh, and last night someone at the poster asked, how does this connect to AMTE's document about teacher training? And it does very nicely because some of those recommendations, this really gets to the nuts and bolts about how to do some of those things that are recommended in that document. So these documents connect. That leads to the second document, Common Vision. So Karen, wave. So Karen Sachs and the person who formerly had my job, Linda Brady, worked on Common Vision, which asked the question, if you got 18 math societies, and in this case they looked closely at 5, what in the policy documents of these different societies that sometimes are even acting in competition with each other can actually help us hold hands and move together on important policy, pedagogical, curricular, this question of where is math going in the future. And so the Common Vision document is a really critical document that shows that we as societies have more in common than we have apart from each other, and I think it has really opened a new era of cooperation that we need to continue. So thank you for that. So you can look there for ideas about answering the question, where is the math landscape going? Math 2025 from the National Academies is also another one that can answer that question. And the last one really digs into a decadal study of what should the math curriculum look like at the college level, which is useful not only for the college level, but for the high school level to ask what's happening with curriculum at the college level. And so this is pretty recent, so you can look there to ask the question, what kinds of courses are being taught? How in particular is data science making an appearance in the college curriculum? Those kinds of things. Okay. So the second question, you may have heard, besides, oh my God, I'm on another team, is my daughter, when she was in high school, a fantastic public high school, a student stood up in the middle of class and was just so frustrated. I learn math every year, nobody ever uses this stuff. Like, why are we doing this? And she was like, my mom does, but that, you know, that wasn't really compelling. So I think that it's really important that we understand where the resources are out there to connect students, their mathematics, both with their own lives, with themselves as decision makers, and with their careers. Now, I put progress through calculus at the bottom. David introduced progress through calculus. That's not particularly career focused, but I do think that calculus is used as this gate something, gateway, gatekeeper to careers, right? Because you become eligible for things if you can get through calculus and move on to other stuff. So I think the progress through calculus is really looking at how we teach calculus, how calculus can empower students, how calculus can involve active learning, and really being at the forefront of thinking about calculus as a piece of the mathematics curriculum, which is still quite valid. Statistics, of course, is only gaining in importance as the public really becomes comfortable with the word data science. So Pick Math at the top is an MAA program, and Susie Weeks here is a leader of that program. So Pick Math trains college faculty to teach courses that connect with industry. So you can teach a course where your students are working on a problem that has a real client. And that real client is doing work out in the world. So if you come to the industry panel, you can hear, I think, a little more about that. Stat Prep brings data science into two-year colleges. And the Big Jobs Guide helps you understand, thank you. Oh, that's mine. Oh, I'm timed out on myself. The Big Jobs Guide helps answer that question, how can I get a job if I know some math or stats? And I say mathematical sciences to include operations research, statistics, and math. Okay. So these are things you might email me about and say, what are these? So I hope we see you in Cincinnati. We have a lot of meetings, section meetings, yearly meetings, where you're very welcome. And I hope you will contact us. Michael Pearson, the executive director of MA here, is here also, and we both look forward to talking with you more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And next we'll have Mike Steele. If I could get this mouse. Is it? Oh, here we go. Use this one. Should be the easy part of the panel, but maybe I have too much lotion on my hands or something. Maybe your hands will work better. There we go. Good. Thank you.
Apparently my role is just to be here for the dry hands. And I'm just ever so slightly taller than Rachel, but not quite tall enough to see everybody over here. So I apologize to stand off the side. I'm Mike Steele. I'm the president of the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators. So I want to share a little bit about AMTE for you, particularly for those who may not be familiar, and make some connections and get you thinking about one of our recent documents, Standards for Preparing Teachers of Mathematics. I think we need to take some lessons from AMATYC about our acronyms, because SPTM just doesn't really roll off the tongue in the same way as impact. We're going to maybe work prowess into our next one. So AMTE, the goals of our organization are really to promote effective mathematics teacher education practices and support programs that both prepare future teachers of mathematics and provide professional development for practicing mathematics teachers. So you may be thinking to yourself, AMTE, okay, we're talking about mathematics teachers. This is a little bit of a niche if we're thinking about this broader spectrum of the high school to college mathematics transition. But I'd argue that if we're thinking about the mathematics pipeline from high school into college, the mathematics teaching pipeline is a subset of that. And with the teacher population shrinking, with decreases in the number of students who are interested in pursuing careers in teaching, it's imperative that we change our thinking on this. We don't have the luxury anymore of thinking about, okay, let's see what we can do in getting kids through the high school to college math transition, and then let's figure out, of that set that made it successfully over that hurdle, which ones are the ones that we want in classrooms teaching kids. We have to start thinking about this right at this transition point, and I argue even into late high school, and thinking about how do we get kids excited, passionate about mathematics teaching. I was having some conversations last night at the reception about elementary mathematics, and I was saying one of the things that I want, and I see this as an issue in the education of my own students, of my own kids, is I want teachers at every level, from high school teachers all the way through our pre-K teachers, who are passionate about mathematics and about teaching kids mathematics. So with that said, I'm not going to read every bullet point on here, but you see some resonance with some of the things that you've already heard talked about. AMTE's real niche here is thinking about research and the scholarly practice of mathematics teacher education, but you see notes here about equitable practice. You see notes about professional growth that you heard resonated in AMATYC and MAA's discussions. And you see equitable practices in mathematics teacher education, which mirrors what Robert was talking about with catalyzing change in the notion of equitable practices in the classroom. So in 2017, AMTE published the standards for preparing teachers of mathematics, with that lovely cover that you see there. You can find the entire document and a whole bunch of ancillary materials at amte.net/standards. This is a comprehensive set of standards that describes a national vision for the initial preparation of teachers pre-K-12 who teach mathematics. We use that phrase strategically because it includes everybody that has responsibility for student learning in mathematics. So it's not mathematics teachers, it's teachers of mathematics. So it's special education teachers. It's administrators that have a hand in students' learning. It covers the entire spectrum. These standards are aspirational. They don't describe minimum competencies. This is not a checklist for everybody who completes a teacher preparation program, but it really describes what is a vision, what is an aspirational vision. I look at my own secondary mathematics teacher preparation program out in Milwaukee, and there are aspects of this aspirational vision that we're achieving and aspects that I still want to work on. And there's something for everyone in here. The audience includes everybody who's involved in mathematics teacher preparation. Another theme that you're hearing today, and this first bullet point echoes it, is that these standards build on other recommendations. So they build on principles to actions. They build on the Common Core state standards, or whatever you've rebranded them in your individual states. They build on CBMS's MET2 mathematical education of teachers too. They draw from the ASA document. We drew from GAME. We pulled from all of these ideas. Common vision is represented in there. So yeah, read ours. It's got everything that everybody else's has. The standards don't replace accreditation reviews such as CAPE or state-based accreditation, but they inform how you might think about that, and they support the work of assessing teacher candidates and programs. I'm going to show up here our candidate and program standards. There's a lot in this document, including some grade band specific recommendations for teachers who will be teaching early childhood, elementary, middle grades, and high school. But I want to highlight these candidate standards and the program standards, because I think these are the things that I want to challenge you to think about over the next 2 days. So the candidate standards, these are the sorts of things that we want teacher candidates to be able to do. We want them, C1 is really, do they know the math, but the concepts, the practice, the idea of mathematics curriculum. C2 and C3 are ones that I want you to think really hard about. Pedagogical knowledge and practices for teaching mathematics. So I teach secondary methods courses, so you're thinking, okay, Mike, this is your stuff. But I want you to think about, how does that pedagogical knowledge play out in the collegiate math courses that teachers are taking before they even make it into education coursework, into those first and second year mathematics courses, be it the math majors that are coming through the calculus sequence that might be bound for high school mathematics, be it the folks who are going to be in the college algebra courses or the quantitative reasoning courses that are going to move perhaps into elementary, perhaps middle grades, be it the math content for elementary teachers, for middle school teachers, for high school teachers courses that we're teaching. And what I want everybody to think about is, how can we represent good teaching and elevate the good teaching that we're doing to a level that our students coming through will be able to see and understand what we're trying to do as mathematics instructors that support their learning, because those are the lessons they're going to take forward into their work as teachers. So how are we not just going to teach well, but to elevate the inspection of that excellent pedagogy for the students who are coming through our classes? So that's the first challenge I want to think about. The second set here, these program standards, are about the things that we need to pay attention to as we start to consider how to build effective mathematics teacher preparation programs. I want to call some attention to P1, partnerships. We talk about partnerships between K-12 districts, between two-year colleges, between four-year colleges, between math departments, between education schools and colleges, as a part of building an effective mathematics teacher preparation program. So that implicates the work and the teams that you have here. As you're thinking about partnerships, think about how are we developing interest and passion in mathematics that's going to serve all students, but is in particular going to serve the students who are going to come through and be teaching the next generation of students coming through there. I'll point out the work that's being done in Milwaukee with the M-Cube partnership that brings together Milwaukee Public Schools, Milwaukee Area Technical College, and the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee as an example of a partnership focused on thinking about mathematics learning that then is feeding into ideas like, how do we develop a grow your own teacher initiative that really starts to pull that teaching thread through. These candidate and program standards are being used by a lot of states as they're thinking about reshaping their teacher certification process. Where's my folks from Iowa? Shout out to my Iowa folks who are rebuilding their certification standards around the AMTE standards. So I'd encourage you, as you're thinking about these ideas in your team, to draw on the work of the AMTE standards and the way we're talking about preparing candidates and building programs to strengthen the mathematics teacher pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, this is a panel, and there certainly will be about a half an hour for questions afterwards. So make sure you're jotting down your, yeah, forget it. My fingers are not working. Are you getting it, the mouse? So yeah, make sure you jot down the questions so you don't. So let's just use this.
Need my dry hands again?
That's what you're here for, right?
Here we go. Thank you.
It's an extended setup.
It's a what?
I can change it back to duplicate. So when you can't see this,
Oh.
it's boosted.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't see the mouse, just think of another screen on the right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good. All right. So now we have Nick Horton, who's going to tell us a lot of stuff.
Thanks, Suzanne. I'm really excited today to be able to talk about some developments and innovations in statistics and data science that I think have broad relevance for the mathematical sciences. Let me start with the Guidelines for Assessment and Instruction in Statistics Education College Report. This is a report that was initially put together in 2005, but updated in 2016, in large part based on the rapid increase in available data that really makes the study of statistics and data science much more salient. The fact that we're now having so much more statistics, we've heard about that already just this through the panel in K-12, that we have a huge growth of statistics in the university level, and also the emergence of data science with this computational focus to it that really is growing and expanding the discipline. So the Gaze College Guidelines are really guidelines on how to best teach statistics. They dovetail and interconnect really well with the Instructional Practices Guide that we talked about. You can argue at some level that nothing changed from 2005 to 2016, that the 6 main points are still the 6 main points. But you could also argue that everything has changed. When we think about teaching statistical thinking, that was a little bit vague in the 2005 report. What's really made explicit in the 2016 Gaze College report is that we need to be giving students experience with multivariable thinking. This goes far beyond just the univariate and bivariate approaches that are still all too common in statistics courses. Students need, in a world of found data, to be able to start to kind of look at much more complex interrelationships. There's still the focus on conceptual understanding, the integration of real data, which now becomes much more straightforward to bring in given the power of tools that are available. There's aspects of active learning and other kind of project-based pedagogies. But we also really changed a lot in terms of technology and define what it really means to kind of have a technology that can give students these experiences with multivariate thinking. The A in Gaze stands for assessment. That's actually critically important still. How do we use assessments to really improve things? So these guidelines, I think, are really valuable for us to be thinking about as we look from junior year to junior year, because the aspects of multivariate thinking dovetail beautifully with key concepts. When we start thinking about aspects of confounding and design, this is really fundamental. You can, multiple representations here, there's a geometric connection as we start thinking in multiple dimensions. What I think is critical and what was now very explicit from the Gaze report, this can't be taught with calculators or Excel. It really is impossible to be doing that. Those are not the tools people are doing statistics and data science in the real world. Yet our computer science colleagues are now growing in some incredibly exciting ways at the high school and university level with real computational tools. So that's kind of challenge one that I think is before us. The second one is that instructors may not have had the experiences when they're going through their training programs. The MAA-ASA guidelines really describe what is optimal training for those teaching statistics, and I think we need to kind of figure out ways of giving them that experience, and then lots of opportunities for faculty development. So the Gaze College report, also the equivalent Gaze kind of parallel K-12 report is available in your packets and on the ASA website. But I also want to talk about the Data Science for Undergraduates report. I was a co-author of this consensus study from the National Academies that really was trying to outline what things would look like at the undergraduate level as we start seeing this growth of data science. It's interesting to me what large proportion of the reports, when people download it, because it's a free download, they say what they're doing it for, and they're like their parents interested in opportunities for their kids. Data science really is something that I think is here to stay, and I think it's really important for the mathematical sciences to embrace it very actively. The study was commissioned really to kind of think about ways that we could be training the next generation of college graduates, be them all or ones focusing in these areas, on how to have these skills to analyze data effectively. It was about an 18-month process. There was lots of materials and resources that got pulled together for that. I want to just give kind of a highlights of a couple of key aspects of the report. It's really intended to kind of both lay out what we think data science relates to and how we would think about programs, starting them, how we can really ensure that the right parts and pieces are in place for this connection, really in the first 2 years for a lot of these courses. We quite astutely didn't define data science in the report. That's like the Venn diagram nightmare that I think we've all seen, but we did define this aspect of data acumen, and I think that's actually a really helpful way of structuring some of these conversations. These obviously had mathematical, computational, and statistical foundations, but a whole series of topics, concepts, however you want to be thinking of these high-level things that are data technologies, the things we haven't been teaching as much, but are really critical, particularly for people going out in the world and truly extracting meaning from data. Ethics was listed last, not because it's least important, but because it needs to be baked in. And that's, again, an area where we've not always had that as kind of a key place in our curriculum. Diving into just one of these, the mathematical concepts that we think are important for data science include things like set theory, basic logic, the multivariate thinking from the Gaze report that I talked about, some basic probability theory, matrices, basic linear algebra, networks, graph theory, and optimization. So obviously here you see the challenge. If you took all the courses to need to do all these things, that's going to be an incredibly long string of prerequisites. We need alternatives and other approaches to do that. There's lots of other recommendations in there. What we want really institutions to be thinking about is both data science for everyone, what Joy of Data courses could look like in high school and college, what courses like Data 8, the Berkeley model, that could be thinking about for kind of data science from a more technical standpoint, as well as majors and minors. We talk about the importance of getting 4- and 2-year colleges together. The growth of data science at the 2-year level is remarkable, and really trying to figure out how to make that most coherent. Just want to spend 30 seconds talking about a related initiative from the National Academies, the Roundtable on Data Science Post-Secondary Education. Rachel, Uri, and others, myself, are part of this initiative that brings business, industry, and government together to talk about these broader educational issues. In June, there's going to be a session on 2-year colleges and the foundations for data science. This is professionally webcast. Notes are put together from it, and people are encouraged to kind of participate. There's also lots of materials in terms of other roundtable meetings, which I think much of it is relevant to some of the conversations we've been having. So thank you very much for the chance to kind of talk about 2 things near and dear to my heart.
Thank you very much. Yeah, can you see the mouse?
Every time we get up here.
Yep.
It's causal.
And now we have Dr. Dan Teague from North Carolina School of Science and Technology.
Thank you. So we have the rest of the time, right? Is that? So I'm here, Dan Teague from the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics, representing SIAM, the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics. SIAM is a smallish organization of applied mathematicians and mathematical scientists of all flavors who have put together a report called the GAME Report to describe what mathematical modeling looks like from the practitioner's perspective in the K-12 curriculum, actually K-16 curriculum. This is inspired, of course, by the GAZE report. And the idea is that we don't want, if mathematical modeling is going to be an important feature in the K-12 curriculum, we don't want the test makers and the textbook publishers deciding what mathematical modeling looks like in the schools. So we wanted to get our licks in early. And so what we've tried to do is describe from our perspective what this is going to look like. So the GAME report has several sections. There's this introductory section, what is mathematical modeling? There's a section that Rachel Levy was the head writer on for the early and middle grades. I was the lead writer for the high school portion, and then there's an undergraduate portion. Each of those has a different flavor and is written by a different subset for a different audience. And then there's a resources section that goes through and looks at some exemplars, some detailed activities that try to describe this through examples, because it's very difficult if you've never done mathematical modeling to look at a problem statement and have some sense of what might be happening in the classroom. So we try to do this by examples. The idea is that you read the introductory section, and then, for example, if you're in high school, you read what is mathematical modeling, and then move to the high school section and the resources section that supports the high school section. I strongly encourage everyone to read the early and middle grades. It is a magical section. It describes in such a great way how meaningful, exciting, and the changes that happen in the student's vision of mathematics as well as the teacher's visions of mathematics. So I'd encourage you to look at that. So the first section simply defines mathematical modeling. process that uses mathematics to represent, analyze, make predictions, and otherwise provide insight into real-world phenomena. And it does this through a couple of examples. The high school portion then looks at more examples in greater detail. It describes the modeling cycle that you've seen in many different forms. The idea here is that each time we try something, we learn something. We're not always successful. We make a stab at it. We learn, get a little bit of information, and we start again from a new perspective, from a new point of view, from a new level of understanding. And we constantly build our understanding about whatever phenomenon it is we're looking at. It's a slow process, and I can't overemphasize the importance of being a slow process. So many students think, well, I really like math, but I'm not very good at it because I'm not as fast as some of my colleagues. At some point, we need to quit picking our marathon runners by checking their 100-yard dash times. And mathematical modeling allows you the time and space to do that. So we look at lots of examples. We again, do it by examples. On the left, we have, you're buying some new computers for your classroom, and you look at consumer results, consumer reports, and they've listed them they've ranked them on their performance and their ease of use. And so the idea is, given that information, which one do you choose? Well, so what do you do with it? Do you think in terms of, well, is it the one that has the largest score? Do I multiply them together? The 0, 0 is the worst one. Do I look at the distance from the origin? 10, 10 is the best one. What's the smallest circle that I can draw that catches one? There are lots of different ways of thinking about this. Each one has some geometric interpretation. But these kids will come up with lots of different ways of thinking about how you might go about doing this. Is one more important than the other? So we look at lots of different examples. In the appendix, there's extended examples. Here we go through and look at 6 or 7 different approaches that students might try, where it might go, some of its strengths, some of the weaknesses, try to lay out some examples of how things might go. Because this is one of the parts that's hard for teachers, is this notion that we don't really know where it's going to go. And that, of course, is the power of mathematical modeling, is that the students get to take it where they think it should go. That they're doing the thinking. They're not trying to remember what you've told them to do. They're figuring it out for themselves. There's a section on assessments, some rubrics for assessing the quality of student work. And a related component is a joint project by COMAP, NCTM, and SIAM in creating the Math Modeling Hub. These are example problems with teacher support. At the present time, it's fairly sparse, but there are several ongoing projects. I'm working on one this summer to try to populate this with example problems from across the curriculum by grade level and by subject and by other aspects of the process. So why is modeling important? Well, because it can alter student perceptions, both about mathematics and about themselves as mathematicians. They come in oftentimes thinking of it as rigid. It requires remembering how. The teacher will tell you how to do something, you'll practice it, and sometime within the next 2 weeks, you're going to get some problems that look very much like what you've been taught to do. And the question is, do you remember how? And if you do, you're a good math student, and if you don't, maybe not. But mathematical modeling is about creativity, and mathematics is about creativity. It's open and empowering. It requires figuring out how. Mathematicians isn't just for physicists and engineers. It attends to every interest that students may have. It helps them make a transition to a more student-centered classroom if that's part of your program, where the teacher isn't the only source of intellectual authority, where it's safe, better than safe, to make mistakes, because this is how we learn things. We try it out and see what happens. We see in what ways it doesn't measure up and what ways it does. They share their ideas with each other, they share it with the whole class, and they experience this productive struggle. And it helps build their mathematical identity. Their ideas are valued, they learn to become independent learners and also to work with others. They feel a greater sense of accomplishment, and they discover the mathematics through their exploration of their own ideas. They get to use their own creativity. They're not borrowing the teacher's mind all the time, they're using their own mind. as they're creating these mathematical models. So the game report is freely downloadable, and you can just Google game and it'll pop up, and hope you have some fun reading it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You could stay. Okay, so tell me what the technique is. Just tell me.
So,
Okay, just keep
basically,
circling around until you get something.
it's over here.
It's over here. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, but then here we go. Got it. Well, lost it. Got it. Actually, could you? Anyway, I'll leave it on. Thank you. So thank you very much. Let's give our panelists a round of applause again. And can I have everyone stand up for a minute, please, as you're able?
Yeah.
It's not required, but suggested. And, yep, hands in the air, wave them like you just don't care, and the roof is on fire and all that kind of stuff back in the day. All right, and have a seat as you wish. Thank you. Okay. So, all right, so let's, was that a mistake? All right. So, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio, Maryland, Nebraska. Ooh, that worked. Random. You guys think I'm actually talking to you with specific tasks. I'm just Alaska, Virginia, Maryland. That worked. Ohio. Okay. So I hope you, during the talks, you jotted down some questions for the panelists, because that's what we're doing right now. But I guess I'll have one big question to the panelists from myself. I guess what has happened, and you've told us about the reports and things like that, but also what still needs to happen. What do you still need to do? What is there still out there to conquer? Interpret that as you will.
I guess I'll take. So what has happened? Many states have taken up this conversation, particularly around the critical conversations around tracking. So we've seen other reports that have come out around tracking, just equations from the Opportunities Institute, and others have had this conversation around tracking. So I'm very pleased that this discussion around student tracking and teacher tracking is happening. The other thing that's happening as well is many states are talking about what are the big ideas that all students should know and learn when they leave high school mathematics. And I think that's a conversation that we have to take up. You know, what are those big ideas that when students leave high school, what are those big ideas that all students should know and understand, and how does that prepare them for entry into whether it's college or career, what other choices that students may make for themselves as they move forward. So we've seen states taking a look at pathways and thinking about pathways, and the other pleasing thing I'm finding that there's some collaborations around these pathways between K-12 and 4-year and 2-year colleges is happening. I'm looking at Alabama, who started that pathways conversation and has engaged in that pathways conversation there. I'm also I'm looking at Ohio as well. And I'm also thinking of Oregon as well, who have engaged in those kinds of conversation as well.
Thank you. Nick, you look like you want to
Yeah, is that on? So for me, the role of technology has been really exciting. What's been happening, that the tools that are now people are using, statistics and data science, have gotten dramatically cheaper or free and much easier to use. It's interesting as part of the kind of initiative of a 2-year college data science summit, where we saw the challenges that many kind of math departments had, that they were using calculators still, and they had no access to computer labs, and concerns about their students' ability to actually, use computation. When at the same schools, their computer science colleagues were teaching in computer classrooms with those same students. And so there's a kind of a challenge of where we've developed historically and how to kind of, work together in ways to develop these skills and capacities. We're keenly aware of the challenges in particularly in the 2-year college sector, and the kind of constraints both on time and resources. We heard those very clearly from the AMATYC report. But again, we need to kind of be able to figure out how to actually get the students' hands on the technology and tools that are the things they're going to need in the workforce.
So one thing that I've noticed is there is still a blame game that is going on across all of our sectors. I see a lot of finger pointing. I also noticed that there's a whole lot of data distrust, where data's been put out there, and then somebody looks at it from a different sector and says, well, that's only true there at that such and such a place. And so I think that we need to have a better way to have discussions that don't sound like I don't think we are. I think we're all in this to help more students have success in the mathematics pathways across the board. We want more students to I don't want to go to parties in the future and say, oh, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm a math professor. Oh, math, it's the worst subject for me. So I want to see the conversation shift. I want to see data distrust reduced, really having serious conversations around data and what it points to and what it suggests. And the blame game has got to stop. Because we can't do anything if we keep blaming one another. We have a starting point, we have data to start with. Now where do we go from here? And that's the question that we want to be asking.
I think one of the things that Uri said last night that I've been thinking about since, and Uri, tell me if I'm saying this wrong, is that pedagogy, helping people improve their pedagogy, is doable. We have a lot of ways of doing that. We understand how to establish communities of people as long as you give them the time and the support to build and to look at building their pedagogy as a lifelong endeavor. That mind shift is welcomed by almost everybody. But what Uri was saying is that that has to be preceded by structures that support that professional development and that time and that space. And that hit my heart because our society, MAA, has lived long in the space of professional development. But I don't know that we have lived long, and again, Michael's here, he can correct me later, in the space of helping build the infrastructures that are going to help those folks back in their institutions engage in those professional development opportunities. So that's really what I'm taking forward and thinking as a challenge for my society.
I want to actually bridge some of what Julie said and some of what Rachel said that I think is really important. When Julie's talking about the blame game, one of the things that I hear a lot of times when I work with high school teachers is, well, we can't do all this innovative pedagogy stuff because they're going to go to college and they're going to get lectured at and take 3 exams, and we got to get them ready for that, right? And all of what we're trying to do at college is not that, right? So there's this gap in understanding, and I've heard the same thing in the opposite direction of college instructors saying, well, we're trying to do all this innovative stuff, but clearly they're not doing it at the high school level, or they've come to us more prepared, right? So I think bridging that gap a little bit and getting our high school instructors, our 2 years, our 4 years, to see what's going on, to build those networks across those boundaries is going to be really critical. I think from a teacher preparation lens, I think we've now started to get some common agreement and some frameworks in thinking about what does teacher preparation look like, whereas 20 years ago it was almost entirely idiosyncratic across institutions. I think that's a big step forward. I think a next step, again, to stop side-eyeing across the tables, is to start thinking about how do we build networks of collaboration in teacher preparation. So it used to be that I'd eye my colleagues at UW La Crosse when I lost a teacher candidate to them and say, I lost a teacher candidate to La Crosse. They should have come to me in Milwaukee. And we don't have the luxury of doing that anymore. We have to think about how can we be supportive across these institutions and collaborate and build networks. And maybe I don't have enough students one year in Milwaukee to do something I want to do that's being done in La Crosse. And so how do I bridge those gaps? And how do I bridge the 2-year gap? I have plenty of students who come into our elementary teacher preparation programs through our 2-year college pathway. There are so many, I'm sorry, there's so many hurdles for the students who may want to be secondary math teachers if they've started at a 2-year college, and those are all self-inflicted wounds that we've put on ourselves. And so like part of my mission is how do I figure out how to leverage that pathway so a student who starts at a 2-year has a way to be a high school math teacher if that's what they want to do.
Thank you. Dan, did you want to add anything?
Evidently I do. So one of the, I think the important thing is whatever changes that get made, that sufficient teacher support, sufficient lead time, and sufficient preparation for them to do whatever it is, whatever changes are suggested, really be there. 2 weeks ago in the county in which I live, the students went out on strike, not because of a shooting or anything that nefarious, but because they didn't like the math program. The change from you tell me how to do it, I'm going to practice it for 2 weeks, and then you can ask me some questions and ask if I remember how to do it. I can be very, very successful that way. But now you're asking me to think through things and explain why. And students who historically have been really strong are now struggling, or in their minds they're struggling. But the teachers had 4 full days to prepare for this massive change of how the curriculum was going to be organized. 4 full days.
Thank you very much. All right, so are there any questions for the panelists? Is there a state that starts with the letter B? Is there a state that starts with the letter B? No, there is not. Okay. Is there? I don't know. Anyway, question.
First of all, I want to thank you guys for all of your work. I love hearing what's happening, but at some point I feel like we keep preaching to the choir, which is what's here in the room. And I'm just wondering, how do we? This is a cultural shift in so many ways. We're dealing with a predominant culture viewing math particular ways, and so what do we need to do? And maybe that's part of what this conversation is about. But what needs to happen so that we can really make that cultural shift?
Did everybody hear that? I think. So the gist I got was right now this conversation is basically a conversation among the choir, and what needs to be done to make the greater cultural shift and spread this, well, I guess spread the conversation, the discussion, the ideas beyond this room. But you said maybe this is why we're here together, and you're here on teams and all these things. But any words you wanted to add to that, or panelists?
So I was just thinking that there is hope. Because I was trying to think about back when I started doing a lot of this work with AMATYC in 2000, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. We had a conversation about pathways and what was the mathematics that was necessary for high school grads, and we started actually having these conversations about how to get more STEM majors or how to design a non-STEM pathways. And it's been 10 years, and we also have these things called National Math Summits, and we just had our 3rd one at the AMATYC conference in Orlando this past year. And the words that we started using back in 2009 are now mainstream. they're part of our norm. They're part of what we discuss. And it isn't the choir necessarily that's always at attendance in some of these meetings. So I liken it again to that ripple effect that I was talking about with the design on the cover. You have that one drop and you watch I almost feel like it could end up being a tidal wave, but in a good way, a good tidal wave. To watch the transformation and the change, the more and more people that get involved and become engaged and own the work, the more people become the cheerleaders, the people that recognize that we have these students. And I think Uri dubbed this the joyful conspiracy years ago, 2009, I believe. And I do think that the joyful conspiracy is growing. We are becoming the voice at many of our organizations' meetings now, rather than the silent partners that we started with. It was small, but now we're watching more and more people look at the data and talk about the change.
Thank you. So we have a question over there. What table are you? What state?
Oregon.
Oregon.
I wanted to sort of echo a suggestion I actually made to Diane last night on exactly this, which is that the societies can help together. This is one thing I think the CBMS could really do well. Frame what mathematics is and what teaching mathematics is. Get that conversation moving in the right direction for the general public. So you don't hear, oh wait, he didn't teach me, she didn't teach me. I could envision sort of I communicated with our athletic director at my campus last week and said, well look, does a football practice look the same as it did in 1950? Why should a college math classroom look the same as it did in 1950? So there's an opportunity there for us to give this cover, because it is a big ask for high school teachers or even college faculty to make these changes without broader awareness that this is actually what all of our professional societies recommend.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I respond to that a little bit? I don't want to get off on a rant here, but I could. One of the things that keeps me up at night is that as a mathematics education community, we do a tremendously terrible job of promoting and messaging to the public on the whole. We have some pockets of doing this really, really well, but in general, there are other people external to our community that are defining the narrative about what math teaching and learning looks like, and we have to change that game. I would challenge every one of the state teams here, as you're talking and making plans over these next 2 days, to think about what do the public outreach components of this look like for your plan. When I see this great work going on at AMTE, I see it going on in our state affiliates that are leading the way of that messaging, because you're doing the work in the trenches with that. At the same time, I want you to come to us as you're thinking about that and say, hey, Mike, this is what I need from AMTE. This is what I need from NCTM to help us move that messaging forward. We have documents, we have position papers, we have things that this community reads. I don't think we've thought as much about what that looks like pressing out. So let's think about that together for the next 2 days.
So I had a hand there. We have a new question? Or,
I just wanted to build off what you're saying about that PR piece. I sit here and I listen about, so I'm Michelle from Maine, and we have these great conversations. And then I think about literacy and the public awareness around the importance for literacy for all, and the Read Across America campaign. So where are the national math campaigns is what I've been wondering for years. We can learn so much from the way literacy has been embraced, and taking some of those activities and public announcements and just making them work for mathematics, and start small and grow big, but we get to go onto that platform.
Right.
I'm wondering why.
yeah, we all have a summer reading list for the kids, right? And they talk about summer learning loss, but not so much in math. Good, thank you. And yes, the gentleman there?
What role do you see common standards and assessments across the pathway playing in helping unify
Did everyone hear that question? All right. So let's say it again. What role do we see commons assessment?
Standards and assessment
And
across the continuum to help guide these pathways. How, especially assessment, what role do you see assessment playing to help smooth the pathways for students?
the role of assessment in smoothing the pathways and getting us going on these things, right?
I mean, Dan and I have had conversations now for a number of years about whether there should be a modeling AP, which is a good example of an indicator that there's this course that you might do in high school and in college. So statistics, I think, is well accepted at this point as something you might do as a course in high school and college. But we worry about it. We worry that that's the right driver to make the kind of space that we want, because we talk to our colleagues in statistics and we understand the ways that has been very valuable in driving the statistics conversations, the pros and the cons. So I think it's a really important question, because I do think NAEP right now has its documents out for review, which has a large modeling component, which is my homework, to help them think about how to assess a very large strand of modeling component in a way that's authentic, that represents what we do want students to be doing. So there are people absolutely working on this, and it's something I'll talk about in the industry panel, that the math competitions in modeling are a great place to look at what it takes to respond to student work in mathematical modeling. So, you know, I think it is absolutely worthy of conversation, and I'm not going to say we have the answers, but I think we have been very quick not to jump on what seems like might be the right answer, because we worry about unintended consequences.
So you had your hand up, and then you, please.
Okay, I wanted to go back to the PR and communications piece. Is I agree exactly with Mike, is we really have to be intentional as state teams, but I don't think we know how to do this. I wasn't raised in that world. And so I think we really need tools. Are there people who are doing a good job with that we can learn from? And then a second part to my question is, to what degree can we weave a national kind of dialogue, a national perspective on this? And I'm just thinking that there is a message just by the existence of this forum, of all the societies coming together. But is there a way that can be more intentionally woven as a national narrative about mathematics education?
I know Peter Turner used to say he would like us to all make a bumper sticker, and maybe we still should, that says it's the word STEM and it has the M crossed out. And the slogan is, STEM without math doesn't happen.
All right, so did everyone hear the original the question? It was more in PR and communications and how that happens, and how do you weave a national dialogue, what tools there are to help us with the that getting the word out about, what was the word out about what mathematics really is, or what PR are you PRing?
Yes.
Okay.
What should be happening in classrooms? What are our goals?
And what should be happening in
And I
classrooms?
do think
and
it's
what are
our
the goals?
responsibility. I do think that is something that is the collective responsibility of the societies, and can be the collective responsibility of CBMS, in the same way that we put out an active learning statement. I mean, we can do things like that show a consensus across many constituencies, but we don't want to do that without you. Right? We want, maybe there are things you can build here and build as you continue to meet together, that then you can come back to CBMS and say, okay, here's 5 things we want you to communicate. We don't exactly know how, because that's not our role, but these are the 5, or these are the 10, or these are the 20. I mean, that would be a tremendous result of you. Okay, 5. Keep it at 5.
Yes, ma'am.
Wisconsin, and I'm probably stepping on everything related to Wisconsin. But I think the elephant in the room here is that we can't have common assessments and understandings about students without having a common sense of curriculum and what goes into that curriculum. And I know that we walk forward and then walk back from
So the question is, just repeating it, I hope everyone was listening, but I'll repeat it. So how do we have a national conversation when we don't really have a common sense of curriculum around the country? We may have something state by state. We don't, we need to get, if we want to have common outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sorry, is that, what should I add? Close enough. Okay.
And Achieve did a study that's showing that when states are adopting something that isn't called Common Core, two of the things that are falling out are, guess, statistics and modeling. You all can help us think about what to do with that information.
When you say falling out, no longer...
They no longer appear in the new set of things that are common.
All right, thank you.
So one of the things that's interesting to me is that we, in our own profession, we tend to hold on to things that are antiquated. We have a course in the state of Florida, and I know that a lot of people do too. It's called college math, or finite math, or liberal arts math, or whatever it is. And I think Uri had coined those classes as math, our friends, the numbers. And in Florida, however, what's interesting about it is that we had a test that we had to give for, it was our teacher's exam that we gave. It was called the classed exam. And we had a class that was designed very specifically to teach what was on the classed exam in 1986. It is still a part of our culture. It is still a part of what we teach. We can't even get that course number to switch or change to a different course because it was so ingrained in what we do. And it's very hard to do change, as we know. But I am pointing out that we are part of our own problem. We have got to figure out what it is that we're trying to do, and because the state of Florida was doing a mandated test for anybody going into education in any way, we started a math class that was topically focused specifically on the topics that were on the teacher's exam, and it still exists today and has been untouched.
I actually want to go back to the conversation around PR, because I do think that in K-12 there is, you can see advocacy around the country that K-12 teachers have engaged. And so one of the things that NCTM has done is engage in the space of advocacy. And we do have, what we call an advocacy toolkit and ways to engage, legislators and engage other stakeholders. But, I do think there's this sense of efficacy and advocacy that's happening with teachers. You can see what happened in West Virginia. You see what happened in Arizona. You see what's happening in North Carolina. The Red for Ed movement is about teachers taking ownership of their profession and their work. Now the challenge is, how do we insert mathematics as a part of that, mathematics instruction and teaching and learning around that idea of the Red for Ed movement? And certainly there's this sense of, professionalism that goes along with that. And this professionalism that's connected to advocacy is one of the ways that we can insert ourselves into that conversation as teachers begin to advocate for themselves in very strong ways. So I would encourage you, just take a look at what's happening in the Red for Ed movement and what teachers are doing to advocate not only for themselves, but also for their students. They do it for their students in very significant ways.
Thank you. All right. So we have 40 more seconds. So.
No. Well, and I'll also add a flip side to that, Jim. is I don't think we can do this without engaging the adjunct faculty that we all have at our universities that are teaching those courses. So I think looking at both ends of that spectrum is critical for us to think about in this discussion.
Good. So there's a lot more we can talk about, but we need to leave. So, but before you get up, David Bersu has some more remarks. But let's thank our panelists because their formal work is done.
Thank you, and let's also thank Dr. Weeks, who did a fantastic job of keeping us on. Okay, we've got a break now for 30 minutes, after which we've got the 3 breakout sessions. So decide within your state teams who is going to which breakout session. Yes. Again, we want at least 2 people in each of them, people for whom that's not their specialty. So the 3 breakout rooms to the right, ballroom BC is higher education. Thank you. To the right, ballroom BC is higher education. This ballroom will be K-12. And to the left, this is ballroom FG, and that's going to be workforce. When you are done with those breakout sessions, you'll come back, get your lunch, come in here for lunch, and please use the lunchtime to talk among your state group on what you've learned from the breakout sessions. So lunch is a time to share what you learned. Thank you.